Elissa and I had a chance to converse earlier this week, and we were talking a little bit about joint disease and about the number of companies that are pursuing the area. I was very impressed with the technology and really how mature it is. So let me turn it over to you to kind of introduce us to Histogenics.
Great. Thank you, Jason. I'm happy to be here to represent Histogenics and tell you about our company. If you don't mind fast forwarding to the next slide, please. Just make sure we have my forward-looking statement.
Can we reset that clock, too, because you have more than 4 minutes.
Thank you. Great.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
And please advance to the next slide, from which we are developing a phase 3 product that is currently enrolling patients in a U.S. study focused on cartilage repair. So this is really the leading investigational product that we have in our pipeline. And I want to tell you a little bit about the therapy in a minute, but just to make sure you understand what Histogenics represents as far as the regenerative medicine technology platform, we really are looking at innovative cellular therapies that help us advance for conditions in the musculoskeletal space. NeoCart is our first product that we hope to see launching in tissue repair, specifically cartilage injury in the knee. And we are under a special protocol assessment with the FDA, currently running this phase 3 trial in several U.S. centers across the country. And we do anticipate that we will complete enrollment for this trial in cartilage repair in the knee in mid-2016, allowing us to evaluate the data on a 1-year endpoint, which is part of that special protocol assessment. And at that point, mid-2017, we hope to see positive data in which we can submit a BLA to the FDA for approval of NeoCart, hopefully in 2018. So we have a lot of excitement for the company around NeoCart, and as such, we are also focusing on developing a robust commercialization pathway for NeoCart if approved. I also I mentioned this technology platform because it doesn't stop with NeoCart. We are obviously looking at next generation advanced and innovative cellular therapies and technology that would be in basically life cycle management or next generation therapies after NeoCart launch. And lastly, I would like to mention Histogenics again. If you aren't familiar, we were successful in an initial public offering in December of 2014, so just a couple of months ago, although it feels like a lot longer than that. We raised about $70 million in gross proceeds, and that cash is going to help us through mid-2017 get to the point where we complete the enrollment of the NeoCart trial, and we can evaluate the data for BLA submission. Next slide, please. So I do want to focus mainly on NeoCart for this discussion. I think NeoCart represents a really innovative therapy, and it's really interesting because it's really about the sum of all of NeoCart's parts. So you see here that we have an autologous process that supports the development and production of NeoCart. This is a 2-step procedure, and again, we are focusing primarily for our first indication on knee cartilage repair, so cartilage injury that you see in the femoral condyle. It's a very significant problem in the orthopaedic space, a very underserved patient population and large unmet need. And we look at, from an autologous process, biopsying healthy, normal cartilage from a non-weight-bearing area in the knee, and we bring that sample back to our laboratory, where we run it through a series of processes to support our regenerative medicine technology platform. And these processes include cellular isolation and expansion of chondrocytes, which are the cells that build cartilage. And then we actually do something very unique and proprietary to Histogenics, and as far as we know, proprietary and unique based on all the other cellular next-generation therapies in development and in the market. We actually put it through a bioreactor. So we bioengineer this cartilage construct after it's been seeded into a very proprietary scaffold, which allows these cartilage cells to exist in an environment that they're familiar with, almost as if they're in the native tissue. And once we bioengineer it, we actually will test it, look at biomarkers that allow us to to see that it's functioning like normal cartilage that would be living in the human body. And that is something very unique to this process. Of course, we harvest and package and return it back to the surgical site for implantation into the human knee. And this is about a 6 to 9 week process. Next slide, please.
And Elissa, I just wanted to hit on that a little bit, because you and I on the phone talked about under pressure and the idea that this is not just kind of these chondrocytes are going to be in a pressure environment and friction, and that is a very differentiating factor of your process. So could you just take a minute and just expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely, I'm happy to do so. And if you back up one slide, sorry about that. The bioengineering that we do is actually in what's called a tissue engineering processor. So you see that picture there of what looks like a very large, clunky machine. This is actually what I would qualify as our secret sauce, so to speak, of the NeoCart production. We actually simulate the condition of a human knee, almost as if a 145-pound man was continuously walking on this cartilage construct that we're developing, the NeoCart. And what it does is it creates an environment of hydrostatic pressure and low oxygen, which is consistent with what you would find in the human knee. Cartilage is avascular. It cannot repair itself when it is injured, and we actually take these cells to create a construct that is almost primed to look and feel like normal and living cartilage that you would find in the knee, and we test it for development of extracellular matrix, proteoglycans. So we actually, once it comes out of that tissue engineering processor, we can confirm that this is as close to articular hyaline cartilage as you would actually find functioning in the knee prior to implantation. So you've got a functioning, healthy piece of cartilage prior to it going back into the injury site.
And for me, this is very critical, right? Because, like you said, this is the secret sauce, and this is a major differentiating factor of this company versus the approaches of others. Like I know that Astrum or Varicella is here today. I don't believe Vista was here today, but I think it's important to understand that your belief is that the longevity and efficacy of this product should be differentiated as a result of this component of the manufacturing process.
And that's correct, and that's what we hope to demonstrate with our phase 2 trial, which is, I will go over the results in a minute, which is a very robust trial and replicates the phase 2, where we really saw some substantial efficacy and superiority over the standard of care relative to improvement in pain and function. We actually followed patients up to 5 years, and the results were consistent for those 5 years. I would also like to mention, since it was discussed at the last conversation with Pluricem, we also have brought this manufacturing process in-house. So the raw material development, where we were originally relying on third-party vendors and the QA process or the CGMP facilities might not have been in our ownership and control. They now are pretty much completely 100% in-house for Histogenics to support the manufacturing process. And importantly, and strategically, that allows us to really look at how we are going to scale once commercialization is achieved with NeoCart, hopefully in 2018.
Okay, good, thank you. Let's go to the next slide.
So we'll go ahead to the next slide. And all I'm going to mention here is just reiterate that when we're thinking about the target patient relative to orthopedics and cartilage injury, this really is the healthy, normally functioning adult who is very active and has either seen a wear and tear over time on their cartilage injury, which has created a cartilage injury, as well as potential patients who see an acute injury to their cartilage. As I mentioned previously, cartilage is avascular, so there's no blood supply to allow it to heal on its own. And what we see is that this can come forward with progressive disease in the knee or require a knee replacement at some point in time. So this is really getting to those patients, hopefully before that happens with NeoCart. I will just mention there are some products and procedures on the market today that seek to achieve efficacy with respect to cartilage injury. I'll mention microfracture because this study is running a head-to-head study against microfracture, the standard of care. If you're familiar, it's basically drilling holes into the subchondral bone to produce a blood clot that in theory would recruit the mesenchymal stem cells to hopefully see some sort of regenerative capability in that injury site. What we see with microfracture and other procedures out there that there's really variable results and might not necessarily offer sufficient long-term durability and efficacy for patients with this type of injury. Next slide, please. I do want to very briefly talk about our phase 2 study because this really gave us the confidence to move NeoCart into a phase 3 study. The phase 3 study replicates phase 2, and it was actually a study run head-to-head against microfracture, again, with 30 patients. It was not powered to show superiority. And we based it on what I would call a composite endpoint. The more technical word we use is a dual threshold responder analysis, where you need to see a marketable improvement in pain and I underscore, and function in order to be considered a responder. And what you see there in the blue and black bars is the NeoCart response in year 1, 2, and 3 versus a microfracture response, the NeoCart being the blue bar. Those are the percentages of patients that actually were deemed responders in this study. And obviously you can see that this demonstrated significant efficacy over the standard of care and was statistically significant. So a lot of confidence going into phase 3. Next slide, please. The last thing I'll mention is NeoCart, as we addressed just previously with Jason's question, is very unique, and we hope to differentiate it based on the other, what I would call key cellular therapies that are looking at cartilage repair. So we know about NeoCart and MACI potentially coming into the U.S. with studies that is TBD still, as I understand it, and Reviflex, which my understanding is running a phase 2B study. NeoCart has the potential to be a first mover here into the market, and we think of it as the potential for a best-in-class product of these cellular therapies because of the reasons I described. It's not only a matter of the cells and the scaffold that represents the environment that cartilage needs to grow and function, but it is also that key piece of the bioengineering where we actually prime that cartilage to be a living piece of tissue prior to implantation into the human body. And that is something that we seek to really achieve significant outcomes and demonstrate the efficacy over time. The phase 3 is a 3-year study, and we will be having a release of 5-year data and sometime in 2015 from the phase 2 study showing the consistency of efficacy results there.
So close with me a little bit on my one concern. And you know what that is.
Yes.
I always worry when we talk about autologous that the time, the cost of goods is going to be a problem. How have you addressed that so that the product will be competitive even if the efficacy is superior?
Yes, and thank you. And we've been doing a lot of work on the manufacturing process to make sure that we're optimizing all of the quality processes, procedures. And one of the big strategic reasons we brought this in-house was that we could control every step of the process, and we can manage the production of NeoCart relative to the implant ratio that we're going to achieve as a result of the unmet need and the number of patients that we will eventually see for scale-up in the commercial landscape. I think the best thing we could have done is bring that manufacturing process in-house to really support this process. We are looking at pretty high margins. I believe we publicly disclosed they're about 70% is what we look to achieve, and there is a significant optimization opportunity there. It really is about that underlying process that exists for NeoCart, the regenerative medicine technology that, quite frankly, right now today we are using from an autologous processing perspective, but that's not to suggest that in the future we're going to be looking at next generation approaches and also allogeneic single source, single cell lines. So I think really the sky is the limit in terms of applicability for this technology platform and specifically for NeoCart in the nearer term, nearer future. I feel like I should take questions from the audience.
Elissa, thank you.
Great, thank you.